Hey guys, how's it going? This is Natenator. The closet was, well, it wasn't what he'd been expecting. He didn't know what he'd been expecting. It was a little room, maybe 10 feet by 12, with exposed concrete walls and 2 rickety shelves. A rusted lawnmower sat in one corner, and a pile of molding boxes filled with fluorescent light bulbs rested beside one of the shelves. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the stained linoleum floor was curling. He held his breath. He couldn't bear the smell. Where had Thaddeus gotten to? There was nowhere to hide. Behind him, he heard the door slam shut. He whirled, right hand instinctively reaching for his gun. Standing in front of him, between him and the door, was his grinning doppelganger. The man wore his uniform. Nunez recognized his own pointed nose, unshaven cheeks, and receding hairline. His deep brown eyes and untamed brows. He even stood the same way, feet apart, shoulders hunching forward, leaning on his right leg. The man was Officer Carlos Nunez, and he, like the real Nunez, was reaching for his gun. Not thinking, not feeling, operating solely on instinct, Nunez shot. 3 times. He heard the bullets hit, pop, 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 then ringing in his ears, and then silence. He stood frozen, sweat-drenched hands threatening to drop his loaded weapon, trembling and drawing deep, ragged breaths as the dust settled. He'd blown 3 holes through the flimsy wooden door, but again, he found himself alone. He was a middle-aged officer of the law with years of experience, abandoning his partner and hiding in closets, shooting at figments of his imagination. Then there was a mighty crack, then a bang, then a scream, then more screams. He exited the room to the hallway and immediately found himself swept up in a minor exodus. Wild-eyed residents, scantily clad mums with kids, old couples in sweats, piled out of the stairways, fleeing for the exits. Nostrils now clear of the musty, sweet closet stench, Nunez smelled smoke. Then the alarms began blaring. "Fire!" screamed an emaciated middle-aged man, running from the stairwell. Nunez screamed into his radio, insisting that dispatch send every available fire unit to the Primrose Apartments now. He ran up the stairs, crying the alarm, assisting old women with walkers, scooping up toddlers, herding the residents toward the safety of the evening air. When the last stragglers had been evacuated, Nunez surveyed the scene. In the distance, he heard sirens. Then he noticed the residents were all clustered around the same spot in the parking lot, too close to the burning building. A woman screamed. Nunez pushed his way through the throng. A body lay there, sprawled face down, blood pooling around what had been its head. The small dark form was obviously dead. Spongy grey tissue had been splattered across the asphalt. He fell, someone said, or he jumped. Poor little boy. His broken arms were extended, as though he'd embraced the sky. Then Nunez saw the scars on the shattered extremities, and he knew. It took until the early hours of the morning to extinguish the flames, and weeks to even begin cleaning up the mess. Ambulances came and left, 14 injuries in all. The burn unit at the county hospital must have had an interesting night. The uninjured residents, barred from returning to their apartments by the police and fire brigade, trudged to the bus stop or the waiting cars of sympathetic friends. Those with nowhere else to go milled around for hours. Finally, a church down the street agreed to take them in. Nunez saw Marisol and her subbing son, shaking Dolores and stone-faced Michael. Then came the coroner's vans. When the ash had dissipated and the ruined building finally cooled, 9 bodies were recovered. One of them was Rusty. Another, Lydia Wheeler. Lydia had died of smoke inhalation in her room. It was never confirmed or denied, but whispered amongst the firefighters that she'd been locked in. A gas explosion had occurred in the kitchen of Lydia Wheeler's apartment. Little Thaddeus lit a match. He set his mother's couch on fire. He turned on the stove, and before the entire floor was engulfed in flames, he jumped out a window. Motives were thrown around. Finally, it was decided that the little boy was a paranoid schizophrenic, and the entire tragedy was a catastrophic side effect of his psychosis. Nunez had expected an arse-chewing, if not a suspension, for chasing spectres while his partner was trapped in an inferno. So he was much surprised to be greeted as a hero. Some of the people he'd helped out of the building credited him with saving their lives. The human face of the tragedy, as presented by local newscasters, was Rochelle Crane, Thaddeus's older sister. She was lucky. She'd been out of the apartment with her daughter and little brothers at the time, getting ice cream. Rochelle spoke kindly of Nunez, saying he and Rusty had been the only officers who'd cared about her poor, doomed sibling and mother. They fixed up the building, but, not surprisingly, no one wanted to live there. The stubborn residents who remained until the fire had come to their senses. So the Primrose Apartments were abandoned, repossessed by the bank. For years, the building remained empty, serving only as a temporary camp for transients and junkies. But they sold it now, Nunez told me, weathered eyes flashing. They sold it to some healthcare corporation. It's gonna be a convalescent home. Did you tell anyone what you saw? I asked him. He nodded. The cops I worked with, they said they believed me. There was something weird about that place. Everyone knew it. But the thing with unexplainable crap is, no one wants to officially believe you, because that would mean they're crazy. He chuckled humorlessly and shook his head. Fuck it, I'd think I was crazy. Maybe I should show them the tapes. He'd stolen the security tapes from evidence storage. Months and months of footage. They'd been collected by the detective in charge of investigating the fire, per procedure, but were assumed to be worth little. There had only been 3 security cameras installed at the Primrose Apartments, 1 at each entrance and 1 in the elevator lobby. And of the 3, only 2 had been functional. The tapes monitoring the front entrance were useless. The tapes monitoring the elevator lobby left him with more questions than answers. I wanted to see the man with the copy of the Wenatchee World, Marisol's ex-husband, he told me. The one that was, supposedly, in Washington. I thought that if I saw him in the tapes, it would prove that I wasn't delusional. He shuddered. His tired eyes watered. But he wasn't there. I found the tape from that day. I saw Rusty and me coming out of the elevator. I saw myself run back into frame. I rewound the tape and saw Modesto. I saw a ghostly figure. A cloud of smoke, it looked like. Grey and translucent, like a 3-dimensional shadow, roughly the shape of a human being. I saw this shadow person accost Modesto. I saw Modesto try and punch it, and I saw it float away. I saw it standing there, leaning against the wall by the elevator. I stayed up all night, looking through the rest of the tapes. The shadow figure was there again and again, with people all around, and the people interacted with it as though it were another human being. When no one was around it, it faded, disappeared into thin air. And then I saw little Thad. He was in several of the tapes, always in pajamas, always at night, always the same. He'd emerge from the elevator, half asleep, with the shadowy grey thing guiding him, draped around him, leading him like a parent. They'd walk across the lobby and out of the frame, toward that closet. I think that's where it lives. Nunez snuck the tapes out of the station and took them to a friend who tested the authenticity of such footage. The friend concluded the tapes had not been tampered with, and Nunez showed the tapes to his superiors. They'd lectured him about mishandling evidence, told him they'd look into it, and let him off with a warning. It was suggested he see a therapist. Rusty's death had obviously hit him hard. It was getting late, or more correctly, getting early. Nunez looked at his watch, sighed, and crumpled his coffee cup in his hand. He had to go to work, and so did I. The black sky had blanched to periwinkle blue, and the first of the morning customers were filtering in. It's sick, evil, Nunez said in conclusion. The shadow figure. It can change shape, become anyone it wants, disappear into thin air. It screws with people, makes their nightmares real. Modesto was jealous, Dolores was obsessed, and little Thad was devastated, missing his father, trying to make sense of the afterlife. It turned itself into Marisol's ex-husband, Michael, Thad's father. It tortured them, emotionally. It drove Thad crazy. And you? I asked him. He smiled at me, like I'd stumbled over an inside joke. I'm the guy who tells these stories, he said. What's the fun of being an evil spirit if nobody talks about you?